She wrapped her fingers tightly around the warm mug between her palms, staring at the faint crack on the cafe table as if it were safer than meeting his eyes, and when she finally spoke her voice trembled just enough to reveal the truth she usually hid behind polite smiles. "No one wants to date me, mister," she said softly, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "I guess that's why we're both here, right?" He paused mid-sip, not because the words shocked him, but because of how familiar they felt, like someone had reached into his chest and spoken the sentence he'd never dared to say out loud. Across from her sat Daniel, a single father of a 7-year-old boy, a man whose life revolved around school lunches, bedtime stories, and pretending he didn't notice the way people's interest faded the moment they learned his life came with responsibilities. And as he looked at her, simple dress, tired eyes, honesty written all over her face, he didn't see desperation, he saw courage. She went on, words spilling faster now, explaining how friends meant well but kept pushing her into blind dates, how every conversation eventually ended with polite rejection, how she was too quiet, too serious, or simply not what they were looking for. And Daniel listened, really listened, nodding not out of courtesy but understanding, because he too had felt invisible at tables just like this, had seen the subtle shift when he mentioned his son, had heard the silence after texts went unanswered. Instead of offering sympathy, he surprised her by smiling gently and saying, "You know, people don't walk away because you're unlovable, they walk away because they're looking for fireworks instead of warmth," and something in his calm certainty made her look up, truly look at him for the first time. He told her about his life, not the polished version, but the real one, about becoming a father earlier than planned, about the nights he stayed awake worrying if he was enough, about dates that ended the moment the word "single dad" entered the conversation, and as he spoke she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest, relief. There was no performance here, no pressure to impress, just two people sharing truths that usually scared others away. Time slipped by unnoticed, coffee turned cold, and laughter slowly replaced awkward pauses as they talked about small things, favorite childhood memories, simple dreams, the kind of happiness that doesn't shout but stays. And when she apologized for ruining the date with her honesty, Daniel shook his head and said, "This is the first date in years that hasn't felt like a job interview." The rain began tapping against the windows, soft and steady, and in that quiet moment she confessed her greatest fear, that she would always be the one people settled for last, the one who was kind but never chosen. And Daniel's response changed everything. He leaned forward, eyes steady, and said, "Do you know why I stopped chasing people who didn't choose me?" She shook her head, heart pounding, and he continued, "Because my son watches how I value myself, and I want him to grow up knowing that love isn't about being wanted by everyone, it's about being chosen by the right one." Tears welled in her eyes, not because he was promising her anything, but because for the first time someone wasn't trying to fix her or convince her she was enough, he simply saw her. When they finally stood to leave, there was no dramatic declaration, no movie-style kiss, just a shared smile and an unspoken understanding that something meaningful had begun, something built on truth rather than illusion. Outside, under the gray sky, Daniel hesitated before saying, "I don't know where this goes, but I'd like to find out," slowly, honestly, and without pretending, and she nodded, feeling lighter than she had in years, realizing that maybe the problem was never that no one wanted her, but that she had been waiting for someone who recognized her worth without being asked. As they walked in opposite directions, both turned back at the same time, laughing at the coincidence, and in that simple moment lay the quiet promise of a new beginning. If this story touched something inside you, if you've ever felt unseen, unchosen, or quietly hopeful, remember that the right connections often arrive when we least expect them, and if you believe in stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of our value, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and become part of this growing family, because the next story might be exactly the one your heart needs to hear.